I was sitting at my kitchen counter this morning, sipping coffee and admiring the beautiful renovation taking shape around me. $45,000 of my savings had transformed this Victorian house into something magical for our upcoming wedding. The new marble countertops gleamed in the sunlight, and I felt so grateful for the life Chelsea and I were building together. Then my phone buzzed with a text from my fiancé. Mom would kill me if I dump him before he finishes the renovation. My heart stopped. That message was not meant for me. Before I tell you how I turned her mother's greed into the most devastating consequence of her life, drop a comment telling me where you are watching from and smash that like button if you have ever discovered someone was using you. Subscribe, because what I did next with that single text message will leave you speechless. Let me take you back to the beginning so you understand exactly how I ended up in this situation. I am Natalie, a 29-year-old software engineer who worked hard to buy my own Victorian house 3 years ago. It was a beautiful property from the 1920s, but it needed serious updating. The kitchen had original cabinets that were falling apart, the bathroom had pink tile from the 50s, and the hardwood floors were scratched beyond recognition. I met Chelsea 2 years ago through mutual friends at an art gallery opening. She was 26, stunning, and had this creative energy that drew me in immediately. Chelsea was a graphic designer, though she struggled to find steady clients and was living with her mother Linda in a cramped apartment. She would constantly complain about her living situation, describing how suffocating it was to be back in her childhood bedroom with no privacy or independence. After 8 months of dating, I suggested she move in with me. Chelsea was over the moon talking about how we could build a life together and make the house truly ours. She had so many ideas for decorating and designing the space, and I loved her enthusiasm. That was when she suggested we do a complete renovation before our wedding. Imagine having the reception right here in our own home, she had said, her eyes lighting up as she gestured around the living room. We could make it absolutely perfect, our dream space. It would be so much more meaningful than some generic venue. The idea appealed to me. I had been planning to update the house anyway, and doing it before the wedding would mean we could start our married life in a truly beautiful space. Chelsea volunteered to handle all the design coordination while I covered the financial side. The total budget ended up being $45,000 for a complete kitchen remodel, bathroom renovation, new flooring throughout, and updated lighting and paint. When I met Chelsea's family, her mother Linda immediately zeroed in on the renovation project. She would ask detailed questions about the timeline costs and how much the improvements would increase the property value. Linda seemed more interested in the financial aspects than the actual design choices, which I found a bit odd, but attributed to motherly concern for her daughter's future. Chelsea's father, Robert, was quieter during these conversations, often looking uncomfortable when Linda would press for specific dollar amounts or ask about our future financial planning. I noticed he would try to change the subject when Linda got too focused on money matters, but she always steered the conversation back to our house and the renovation. As the months progressed, I started noticing some concerning patterns. Chelsea spent increasing amounts of time at her mother's house, supposedly discussing wedding plans, but she would come home with fewer actual wedding decisions made. When I tried to involve her in renovation choices, she seemed distracted and would defer to whatever I preferred. Most troubling, whenever I brought up the topic of her financial contribution to the project, she would find ways to avoid the conversation. I am contributing by managing all the contractors and design decisions, she would say. That is worth just as much as money. The renovation was now 60% complete. The kitchen had gorgeous custom cabinets and granite countertops that cost $18,000 alone. The bathroom was fully finished with luxury fixtures and heated floors. We had refinished the hardwood throughout the house, and everything looked absolutely stunning. Only the master bedroom and some final touches remained, but those would be completed within the next 2 weeks. The moment I read that text message, my entire world shifted on its axis. I immediately took a screenshot, my hands trembling as I processed what I had just discovered. The message was clearly meant for someone else, probably her mother or a friend. Chelsea had accidentally sent it to me instead of whoever she was really confiding in about her true intentions. I sat there staring at my phone, trying to make sense of what I had just read. Mom would kill me if I dump him before he finishes the renovation. The words kept echoing in my head. This meant that Chelsea was planning to leave me, but only after I had completed and paid for the entire renovation project. I was being used as a human ATM, and once my usefulness was exhausted, I would be discarded. Suddenly, so many things started making sense. I remembered overhearing a conversation between Chelsea and Linda about investment timeline that had seemed strange at the time. Chelsea's recent emotional distance and her reluctance to nail down wedding details took on a sinister new meaning. Her constant postponement of discussions about our future finances was not about being overwhelmed with planning. It was about avoiding commitment she never intended to honor. I made a conscious decision to act normal and gather more information before confronting her. When Chelsea came home that evening from another wedding planning session with her mother, I pretended I had never received the text. I watched her carefully throughout dinner, noting how she avoided eye contact when talking about our future and how nervous she seemed when I mentioned the renovation timeline. Over the next few days, I began subtle investigations. I brought up moving her remaining belongings from her mother's house, and Chelsea said we still had time for that. When I tried to discuss our long-term financial planning as a married couple, she quickly changed the subject to something else entirely. Every interaction confirmed my growing suspicions. I decided to do some deeper digging. I checked our phone records and discovered that Chelsea had been texting with her mother constantly during work hours, far more than normal family communication would require. I found some papers she had left out on the dresser, real estate listings for investment properties, and research she had been doing about property rights after cohabitation. The final piece of evidence came from an unexpected source. Mrs. Patterson, my elderly neighbor, mentioned seeing Chelsea with a real estate agent last week while I was at work. The agent had apparently been asking about renovation costs and current property values. According to Mrs. Patterson, Chelsea had told the agent about upcoming ownership changes that might affect the property. When I could not stand the uncertainty any longer, I called Chelsea's friend Sarah and carefully fished for information. Sarah accidentally confirmed my worst fears when she said, "Chelsea mentioned you were the perfect setup for getting her life sorted out. I thought it was sweet how much you were investing in your future together." The complete picture became crystal clear. Chelsea had never intended to marry me for love. Her mother, Linda, had orchestrated this entire scheme to use me for the renovation, then have Chelsea dump me after the house was completed, but before any actual wedding expenses were incurred. They planned for Chelsea to either continue living in the renovated house or sell it for a significant profit, leaving me heartbroken and financially devastated. I spent that entire night processing the betrayal, feeling stupid for missing what now seemed like obvious signs. But as the hurt transformed into anger, I realized that Chelsea and Linda had made a critical mistake. They had underestimated me, assuming I would be a passive victim of their manipulation. Instead, they had given me all the information I needed to turn their scheme against them. The next morning, I put my plan into action with surgical precision. The first step was forwarding that accidental text message directly to Chelsea's father, Robert, along with a simple message. "I think you should see what your daughter really thinks about our relationship." Robert called me within an hour, his voice filled with horror and genuine remorse. "Natalie, I had no idea about any of this. Linda has been telling me that you and Chelsea were planning the renovation together as an equal partnership. I am absolutely mortified that my daughter would treat you this way." Robert revealed that he had been uncomfortable with Linda's constant questions about my finances and property, but he had assumed it was normal motherly concern. He had no idea that Linda was orchestrating a scheme to defraud me of tens of thousands of dollars. He immediately promised to confront both Linda and Chelsea about their deception. My second move was to systematically cancel every aspect of our upcoming wedding. I called the venue where we had planned to hold our reception and canceled the booking. Since the contract was in my name and I had paid the deposit, I was able to get a full refund. I contacted the caterer, florist, and photographer canceling all services and recovering deposits where possible. In total, I saved $12,000 in wedding costs that would have gone to celebrating a marriage based on lies. Next, I scheduled an emergency consultation with a property lawyer to understand exactly what rights Chelsea might claim to the renovation or the house itself. The lawyer confirmed what I had hoped since Chelsea had never contributed financially and her name was not on any contracts or the deed. She had absolutely no legal claim to the improvements or the property. However, he advised me to document everything and follow proper legal procedures for ending our cohabitation. I spent the next day protecting my financial assets. I closed the shared checking account that Chelsea had access to for household expenses and canceled the credit cards that had her name on them. I secured all renovation contractor payments and made sure every receipt and financial record was properly documented. Then I changed all the locks on the house and updated the security system codes. For the next 2 days, I continued acting completely normal while Chelsea remained oblivious to my discovery. She went about her routine of visiting her mother and pretending to plan our wedding, never suspecting that her entire scheme was already unraveling. I even continued with the renovation work to maintain appearances while I finished arranging everything behind the scenes. Meanwhile, Robert had confronted Linda about the scheme. According to him, Linda initially denied everything, claiming that Robert was misunderstanding innocent conversations. But when Robert showed her the screenshot of Chelsea's text, she finally broke down and admitted to orchestrating the plan. Robert was so disgusted that he threatened divorce if Linda did not immediately stop manipulating their daughter into committing fraud. The family civil war that erupted was exactly what Chelsea and Linda deserved. Robert, who had always been the more principled parent, was appalled that his wife had corrupted their daughter into becoming a con artist. He told me that he would support me in any legal action I chose to take, and that he was ashamed of what his family had done to someone who had only shown them kindness. The weekend arrived, and Chelsea invited her mother over to discuss final wedding details. This was the perfect opportunity for my confrontation. I waited until Linda arrived, then calmly presented all my evidence, the screenshot of the accidental text financial records showing my sole contribution to the renovation, and witness statements from neighbors and contractors confirming that Chelsea had never been involved in the actual work or payments. Chelsea immediately broke down when faced with the undeniable proof. She admitted everything through her tears, claiming that the plan had been her mother's idea and that she had been pressured into going along with it. Linda arrived at the house to find her daughter confessing to fraud and her husband threatening divorce. The carefully constructed scheme collapsed in a matter of minutes. I served Chelsea with a formal 30-day eviction notice, which I was legally required to do since she had been living in the house. She had no choice but to move back in with her mother, taking only her personal belongings and receiving no compensation for her supposed design contributions. I also posted a carefully worded message on social media, letting our mutual friends know that the wedding was canceled due to Chelsea's deception, without going into graphic detail, but making it clear that trust had been irrevocably broken. The immediate aftermath was even more satisfying than I had anticipated. Within the first month, I was able to complete the renovation on my own with the remaining contractors. The house looked absolutely magnificent, and a professional appraisal confirmed that the improvements had increased the property value by $60,000. I was living peacefully in my beautiful home without the constant stress of Chelsea's manipulation and her mother's scheming. Chelsea made several desperate attempts at reconciliation, showing up at my house unannounced and sending long apologetic texts, claiming that she really did love me and had just been confused by family pressure. I ignored every attempt, having learned that actions speak louder than words, and her actions had shown me exactly who she really was when she thought she could get away with it. The family consequences were swift and devastating for everyone involved except Robert, who emerged as the hero of the situation. Robert followed through on his threat and filed for separation from Linda when she continued to justify the scheme as looking out for Chelsea's future. The divorce proceedings revealed other manipulative financial schemes Linda had orchestrated over the years, including pressuring Chelsea's previous boyfriends for money and gifts. Linda lost her primary source of financial support when Robert left, and Chelsea was forced to get an actual job to help support her mother. The graphic design career that Chelsea had barely been pursuing became impossible to sustain when word of her deception spread through the local creative community. No one wanted to work with someone who might view clients as targets for financial manipulation rather than professional partners. The professional consequences extended far beyond just lost design clients. The local creative and business community is smaller than people realize, and stories about unethical behavior spread quickly. Chelsea found herself blacklisted from networking events and collaborative projects. She was ultimately forced to take a retail job at a department store to pay her bills, a far cry from the artistic career she had always claimed to want. 6 months after the confrontation, Chelsea made one final desperate move by attempting to file a legal claim for compensation for design contributions to the renovation. Her lawyer quickly dropped the case when presented with the documentation showing that Chelsea had no written contracts, no receipts for any expenses, and no proof of any actual work performed. The judge dismissed the case and ordered Chelsea to pay my legal fees, adding another financial burden to her already dire situation. Meanwhile, I was thriving in ways I had never expected. The renovation had turned my house into a showcase that was featured in a local home design magazine. More importantly, I had developed a relationship with Jake, one of the contractors who had worked on the kitchen renovation. Jake was honest, hardworking, and appreciated having a partner who valued integrity over manipulation. 1 year after the text message that changed everything, my life looked completely different. Jake and I had gotten married in a small ceremony in the backyard of our beautifully renovated house, surrounded by people who genuinely cared about our happiness. We had signed a prenuptial agreement not out of distrust, but out of mutual respect for financial transparency and independence. Chelsea was still struggling with the long-term consequences of her choices. Her reputation never recovered, and she found it difficult to maintain relationships when potential partners learned about her history of deception. Linda and Robert's divorce had been finalized with Robert receiving the house and the majority of their assets due to Linda's pattern of financial manipulation. Linda was forced to downsize to a small apartment and lost most of her social standing in the community. The most important lesson I learned was about trusting actions over words in relationships. Chelsea had said all the right things about love and building a future together, but her actions revealed that she saw me as a resource to be exploited rather than a partner to be treasured. The experience taught me to pay attention to red flags like avoiding financial discussions, showing reluctance to commit without material gain, and using emotional manipulation to avoid equal contribution to the relationship. Robert and I maintained a friendship built on mutual respect and shared values. He often expressed his gratitude that the truth had come out before I had wasted even more time and money on his daughter's deception. He told me that seeing Chelsea's true character had been painful but necessary, and that he hoped she would eventually learn from the consequences of her choices. 2 years later, I can honestly say that receiving that accidental text message was the best thing that ever happened to me. It saved me from years of being used by someone who saw me as a bank account with feelings rather than a person worthy of love and respect. Sometimes the universe sends you exactly the message you need to hear, even when you were not meant to receive it. The beautiful house that Chelsea and Linda had planned to steal from me became a symbol of my strength and independence. Every room reminded me that I was capable of building something wonderful on my own, and that I deserved a partner who would contribute to that beauty rather than exploit it. Jake and I continued to improve the house together, but every decision was made as equal partners who respected each other's time, money, and dreams. That accidental text message was the best mistake Chelsea ever made because it saved me from years of being used by someone who saw me as a bank account with feelings. Sometimes the truth hurts, but it hurts so much less than living a lie. Have you ever discovered that someone was using you for what you could provide rather than who you are as a person? How did you handle finding out that a relationship was based on deception rather than genuine love? Share your experiences in the comments below and hit that like button if this story reminded you to pay attention to actions rather than words in your relationships. Subscribe for more real-life stories about standing up to manipulation and finding the courage to demand the respect you deserve. Please share this video with anyone who needs to hear that they are worth more than what they can provide for others. Remember that healthy relationships require mutual contribution and genuine care, not one-sided exploitation disguised as love. Thank you for listening to my story, and I hope it encourages you to trust your instincts when something feels wrong, even if you cannot quite put your finger on what it is.